So, once upon a time, I met an older gentleman. We'll say his name was William. Okay? William was in his late 70s, and he had been born in New York, the city, not the state, so in the midst of a really busy place. But when I met him, he was living in a small town in the South. And he was very happy. And so, of course, I had to ask him, how'd you get here? And are you really as happy as you seem here? And he told me his story. So he grew up in New York, and after growing up in New York, he went to college. After college, he got married, he got a job, and that job with the company he got the job with had him there in that same area where he grew up. So he and his wife knew people. They knew the community. They knew the culture. They were happy. But then after a few years, the company decided to move him and to move their whole family to a tiny, itty-bitty town in rural Alabama. So as you can imagine, they were a little anxious about the move. They didn't really want to make the move. They didn't know the culture. They didn't know the people. But if William wanted to keep his job with the company, they had to make the move. So they did. He told me their first week there in that itty-bitty town in Alabama, and I think he said the population of the town was actually less than the population of his college. They met an older couple. And they were just a wonderfully happy, bright couple who had lived all over the place in their career. And some pretty glamorous places as well, and yet they were as happy as they could be to be in this itty-bitty town in Alabama. So William asked him, what's your secret? How can you be happy here compared to all the other places that you live? And the couple said, that's our secret. We don't compare one place to another. We don't compare where we are living to where we have lived. We don't spend time missing the things that we used to have or regretting what we don't have anymore. We take the place as it is, and we try to find as much joy as we can in that place. Now remember, William was in his late 70s when I met him, and he had lived all over the place, he and his family. And when I met him, he was again in a rural town in the South, and he had lived in some big cities as well. But throughout all of it and all those moves, he and his family always found a way to be happy where they were. And I think it was because of that advice he got in that first week in that little town in Alabama. So, the people today in Jeremiah are people living in exile. And just a little FYI, if I was living in Alabama, I would sure feel like I was in exile. Anyway, they are living in exile. Let's talk about what that means a little bit. So, the context of what's going on. Last week, we were talking about the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah was a prophet in the southern kingdom. And while Isaiah was prophesying, the global power at the time was the Assyrian Empire. And the Assyrian Empire was encroaching upon the southern kingdom. They had already taken over the northern kingdom as a tributary. Well, since Isaiah's time, the Babylonians, under King Nebuchadnezzar, have taken over the Assyrian Empire. And now it is the Babylonians who are encroaching. And when it comes down to Jeremiah's time, after Isaiah, they are not only encroaching, they are taking over. Nebuchadnezzar has laid siege to the city of Jerusalem twice. And upon this second time, Nebuchadnezzar has learned that he better get those troublemakers out of there. So Nebuchadnezzar has taken the prominent leaders of Jewish society, the priests, the prophets, even the royal family, and has exiled them to Babylon. Has kicked them out, forcibly removed them from their home. Now, at the same time that Jeremiah is prophesying, there's another prophet. His name is Hananiah. Notice, as we said earlier in Sunday school, we don't have any books of the Bible named after Hananiah, do we? What does that tell you about his prophecies? Weren't all that good. He prophesied that God's people would return within 2 years from exile. That within 2 years, God would break the yoke that Nebuchadnezzar had placed upon them. But it was a false prophecy. God knew the people were going to be in exile for much longer than 2 years. Could you imagine what that would have been like to have believed that prophecy of 2 years? You know, you have been forcibly removed from all that you know, placed in a place among those people who have forcibly removed you, but then they tell you, oh wait, it's only 2 years. You'd just be biding your time, right? I mean, 2 years is not long enough to have to worry about putting down very deep roots, is it? Just waiting for that time to run out so you can make it back home. But God, through Jeremiah, said that's not the case. It will be 70 years in exile. And so for 70 years, you got to do more than just bide your time. You've got to invest in the community. Jeremiah tells the exiles to build houses, plant gardens, marry, have children, have grandchildren, invest in the welfare of the city. Pray for the welfare of the city. For by praying for the welfare of the city, you are ensuring your own welfare. Jeremiah tells the exiles to look at where they are, to pay attention to where they are. Not to just bide their time waiting for some thing or someone to come and rescue them, or some far-off future that may never be there. Rather than worrying about what's out there, Jeremiah tells them to focus on what is right in front of them. I think that's good advice. And not only do I think it's good advice, but George Lucas thought it was good advice, because George Lucas has Yoda tell the young Skywalker when he is trying to convince Yoda that he's ready for his Jedi training. Yoda doesn't think so, and Yoda says in The Empire Strikes Back, forgive me, I'm not going to do the Yoda impersonation, I promise. Ready are you? I know you are ready. For 800 years have I trained Jedi. My own counsel will I keep on who is to be trained. A Jedi must have the deepest commitment, the most serious mind. This one, talking about Luke, long have I watched. All his life he has looked away to the future, to the horizon. Never his mind on where he was, what he was doing. Adventure? Excitement? Jedi craves none of these things. Okay, that last little bit about Jedi craving none of these things has nothing to do with it, but I just love that line. Luke's greatest weakness is that he had the hardest time being in the moment where he was supposed to be and doing what he was supposed to be doing. The exiles are encouraged by Jeremiah not to do that, but to be, not to look away, but to be in the moment, to invest in the community with the people where God has placed them. That's how they were to live in exile. Now, there are people today living in exile. People who, like the Jewish people of the time of Nebuchadnezzar, have been forcibly removed by another government to live in another place. And this is a direct application to their lives. But my guess is none of those people are in this church today. You may know some of them, but my guess is that none of us are here because we have been forcibly removed by a foreign government and forced to live in Longview, Texas. We're here by choice. So maybe, rather than that direct connection, for us this passage carries a different kind of meaning. Maybe this passage talks about exile for us in the sense of a reverse exile or an accidental exile. Bear with me. Raise your hand if you live within a mile of this church. Yeah, not very many people. Interesting. See, my guess is, I don't live within a mile of the church. My guess is that in 1872, when this church started, everyone's hand would have been raised at that moment. Do you live within a mile of the church? Man, a mile away from church would have been a long way to go back then. Everyone lived within a mile of the church. In fact, that's how churches were set up in our North America. We had neighborhood churches. People went to the church that they lived closest to. That's not the case anymore. And if I remember the history here correct, in 1965, this congregation realized that the town of Longview was growing. So they planted a church at the northernmost edge of Longview, which is now H.G. Mosley. St. Andrew Presbyterian Church. And the people in this congregation who were supposed to go way out there to the north side of Longview were the people who lived north of Highway 80, of Marshall Street. That tells you that there were a lot of people who lived south of Highway 80, Marshall Street. Well, now most of us live north of Highway 80, of Marshall Street. The people of Israel were forcibly removed from the place where they worshipped. But we have just been subtly and slowly, maybe even accidentally removed from the place where we worship. Most people invest their time and their effort most heavily in the place where they live. It makes sense. That's your home. That's where you sleep. That's where you want to make sure good things happen. But the reality is that for most of us, our 6 days a week, we are invested in another place, in a different place than where we are invested one morning a week. It's hard to be invested in a place where you don't live. So maybe our church is in some kind of accidental exile as the people, we the people, have moved further away from the community that it's in. I was startled one day when someone told me that First Presbyterian Church of Longview was a South Longview church. But we are. South of Highway 80 is South Longview, but I doubt very many of us would describe us as a South Longview church. So what does it mean when Jeremiah tells the exiles to invest in the community, to invest in the welfare of the community? What does that mean to those of us who might be living now in some sort of accidental or reverse exile? How are we investing in the people who live within a mile of this church? One of the ways that the Jewish people had to invest in their city of Babylon was they had to be okay with the people who were living near them. They had to be more than okay. They had to welcome them into their families. They had to marry them and join with them in daily living. That was how they invested in their community. Ordinarily in churches, that's not how it works. Ordinarily, we like people to be like us when they come to church. We don't necessarily want people who are not like us in church. The Jewish people were living with a bunch of people who were not like them. And Jeremiah said to them, you have got to find a way to be okay with that. You have got to find a way to live with people who are not like you and invest in the welfare of those people. So if we are living in some kind of bizarro exile, what does that mean for our church? I was on a youth trip, mission trip to Chicago one time, and I met a woman. I don't really remember exactly what she did. Maybe she was a community organizer. And I don't remember her name, but I remember her face, and I remember what she said. She said, the church has a voice to use, and if it does not use it, it will lose it. How are we using our voice to invest in this community? You might disagree. I think we are living in an accidental, reverse, or bizarro exile. And that's okay if you disagree. But if we are living in that kind of exile, we need to be aware of it. And we need to be thinking and acting on living in that exile. Amen?